Hello again, everybody. I'm Tom White from the Network for Global Innovation. Cities and states are facing unprecedented unemployment from COVID-19, job loss due to automation, and a gap between the talent that exists in a region and the talent it needs to rebuild the economy. And one of the questions we get asked the most from city leadership around the world is, what is an innovation economy and how can we build one? So in this extraordinary time, we want to share the formula for doing just that and a case study that reveals how an innovation economy can grow and the value it can deliver to the city. Our CEO, Fred Walti, sat down with former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. And in this interview, they recall how they worked together to pioneer one of the largest green economies in the country and one of the most successful cleantech incubators in the world. Keep in mind, this started in a city known for some of the highest poverty rates, worst air quality, and lowest education levels in America. So as you listen to the story, we'll illustrate each step it takes to do this. If you're a city thinking of building an innovation economy, here's what to look for. First and foremost, you need unified leadership with a strong voice who can collaborate across the region and is willing to shape the strategic public policy that enables meaningful change to occur. Your sources of innovation from outside and across the region, like colleges, universities, and entrepreneurial innovators, are needed to bring the technology assets that kickstart growth. Entrepreneurs need to scale businesses quickly, so cities need an innovation engine, an incubator or accelerator, with a multidisciplined team and strategic programs tailored to the mission. For innovation engines to deliver the value entrepreneurs need, they need to be properly funded. So you'll need to attract those with the ability to invest, who believe this vision is important to the region's future. You need to provide pathways to develop talent at all skill levels across the region, to provide economic opportunity for emerging businesses and the diverse and underserved communities critical to innovation. The leader needs to mobilize a team, including the stakeholders and strategic partners capable of delivering results, and monitor their progress against a set of metrics to instill accountability. And to attract participation and funding, you need effective, innovative storytelling that connects with regional, national, and global markets, your grand vision of unique value on a bold scale. These are the 7 elements that comprise an innovation economy, from shaping public policy to telling the world your bold story. And now, I invite you to join the conversation between Fred Walti and Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa and hear how this all comes together.
Welcome. I'm Fred Walti, and I'm the co-founder of the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator. And for a period of 6 years, I served as its CEO. During that time, we took it from literally a program in the Skid Row area of downtown Los Angeles in a truck repair garage to a world-renowned program, always in the top 10 of all incubators in the world. We returned over $600 million worth of long-term economic value to the city of Los Angeles. We helped over 100 companies commercialize their products, raise $228 million worth of investment, and generate $250 million worth of incremental revenue for the city of Los Angeles. It's a story that is close to my heart. As you know, I tell it often, and it's one that I think is important to show how innovation can, in fact, drive an economy. But today, we're going to talk about that from a different perspective, because I tell the story from one of somebody being on the ground, somebody in the trenches of actually building it. And today, we're going to get a chance to talk from the person who made it happen at the very top, the leadership of Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, who was the mayor of LA during our time. We have a chance to work together. We bumped into each other, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to, in fact, tell this story from his perspective. So first of all, Mayor, welcome to our series on innovation and leadership.
Well, thank you for having me, Fred. And I want to thank you for the work that you did leading the Cleantech Incubator. It went from an idea that I had, my team had, to raising the money from Mr. Lecretz, and then to getting it built, and you led the effort to make it a top 10 incubator, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, those are kind words. I want to set the stage. I want to go back a couple decades maybe to the mid 90s. Okay, and the context there was a real issue or debate about could we put pollution and climate regulations in place and still have a growing economy. And I know you were a big part of that discussion. I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
It was 1994. I had just gotten elected to the state assembly. And there were many Republicans, virtually all of them, and even Democrats arguing that we ought to limit the powers of the AQMD, the Air Quality Management District in Southern California, that had really led the effort to clean up the air in the state and the nation. And there was also this notion that if we greened the economy, if we took on the issue of climate change, that somehow we would be hurting the economy. And I called it the jobs blackmail argument.
Well, you know, that argument is still being played out around the world. And now California is, I think, really the case study in terms of how innovation can really drive economic development. So let's roll camera back and start with 2005. You're elected mayor of the city of Los Angeles. And I'd like to hear a little bit about what your thinking was initially about the green economy and climate.
First of all, let me just finish on the jobs blackmail argument. I think we were able to win the day in terms of that argument, as we made the case that you could create new jobs with greening the economy, with solar panel installation, with efforts to create a microgrid and other efforts with renewables. And so we made that case effectively in the 90s, and I actually authored a bill that became one of the biggest efforts to clean up the air since the Clean Air Act until AB 32 and SB 32. And that was the Carl Moyer Act, which incentivized truckers to retrofit their engines to clean engines. And it was a win-win because it cleaned up the air and it kept our economy moving and trucking moving as well.
3 short years after you are elected mayor the first time, we had, until that time, the most disruptive financial disaster in our lifetime, the Great Recession, if you will. And I know during that time, there were a lot of people thinking, we were all scared, just like now we're scared because of COVID-19. A lot of people were scared on what to do relative to that. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I think it's very interesting, actually, very unique in what you put forth in terms of a green economy, a vision for building Los Angeles' economy through clean technology and innovation. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, we'll go back a bit. When I ran for, I finished my speakership of the California State Assembly in 2000. I ran for mayor, and I ran on the notion that we were going to make LA the cleanest, greenest big city in the country. But you hit something. In the middle of the worst recession since the 1930s until this COVID recession, we said, we're going to green the economy. We're going to clean up our port and make it the greenest port in the United States of America and the world, and it is, and it was back then. We made that. And importantly, we're going to develop a fund at the port to leverage our efforts, but also to incentivize the private sector to do things around innovation, around technology, and greening the economy. And so we worked with UCLA, SC, and Caltech to create an agreement around this notion that we could green the economy together, that if we develop technologies, we should work together in that regard. And, we also created, at least the idea, raised the money for the Cleantech Incubator, the LACI Incubator that you became the head of. And so we were focused on this notion that we could leverage what we were doing policy making wise with regard to climate change, making LA one of the greenest big cities, while at the same time leveraging economic development?
2008, I was an entrepreneur, been an entrepreneur for most of my life. And I started my involvement with you and your staff then. I was kind of a pro bono advisor to your staff on how to make a business plan out of the clean tech and green economy. And I remember attending my very first event, and you were on the steps of City Hall. And I think you were announcing, I think, Clean Tech Los Angeles. And as you mentioned, UCLA and the president of USC were on those steps as well. And my question to you is, why those people on this? Why did you think having those kinds of stakeholders were important to get involved in the green economy? Because from my world in clean tech and software, we never needed that. All we needed was, the right software, get it into the market. We didn't have to deal with government or utilities or anything. So why was that important from your perspective?
Well, as I said earlier, and thank you for including that, as I said earlier, in 1994, the resistance to climate change efforts was very, very strong, even among Democrats here in California. And so I knew that we had to address the issue of jobs blackmail, that this issue that we somehow, by greening the economy, we were going to lose good jobs. And so what I said, and I knew that if we were going to accelerate our efforts to green Los Angeles and green the nation, we needed to develop technologies that could get us there, technologies that could create an economy around greening Los Angeles. And so I went to UCLA, SC, and Caltech, and I said, you're all working independently of one another. You're not really coordinated in any way. You're in your own silos developing technologies that can really help us to address climate change. And we're not working with the city at all. And so why don't we all work together, develop those technologies? You still can own the patents, but we can all work together around leveraging those technologies to create green jobs and to accelerate our efforts around this issue of green policies and greening Los Angeles.
So I think you and I first met each other in the parking lot of LACI in October 2011, when we had the grand opening of LACI. And we had a couple hundred people, maybe 300 people there. It's the first time you and I had ever shared a stage. You don't remember that, but I do, of course. And we launched this incubator. And I think that was the first and last time for a number of years that people were really enthusiastic about it. Because from that moment on, I just got, oh, you can't do it. It's not, how are you going to create jobs out of this and so forth? And I know that you just spoke to all the skepticism that you received in the early time. So what did you do to get to work to make this happen? I know what I started to do, but I'd love to, because I know that you had a staff. I work with that staff all the time. So tell me a little bit about the nuts and bolts from the leadership perspective of how to make this happen.
Well, I worked closely with people like Murray Nichols, who heads up the California Air Resources Board under two different governors. I've worked with people like Nancy Sutley, who went on from deputy mayor for the environment and energy to work for President Obama as the chair of the White House Committee on Environmental Quality. People like Romel Pasquale, who worked with us as well and was the deputy mayor for a time. All of them were the intellectual capital. We worked with people like you. I didn't even know that until you reminded me of that, and we met at that parking lot, and I do remember that parking lot. For whatever reason, I found out about the event the night before. I wasn't part of, I wasn't invited to the event, and when I found out about it, maybe because they thought I was out of town, but when I found out about it, I said, I want to go. This was my baby in so many respects. It got built the way so many things do afterward, but certainly raised the money for it, and the idea came from us and me. And so when I met you and we talked, I think one of the things I told you, I was so impressed. I said, we ought to build one. I was thinking about running for governor. I was on my listening tour, and I said, we ought to do one of these all over California, the nation, and the world. And that's where our relationship started, if you recall, in that parking lot of
Well, I guess I took your words seriously, because that's kind of what we've been involved with now on Engine the last number of years, is to try to build these innovation ecosystems around clean technology around the world. Engine has 30 members in 24 countries, so we're doing that around the world. But it started with that idea when you said, we ought to do this around the state. And I thought that was a pretty good idea, and I'm glad you suggested.
Let's be clear about something. I suggested a lot of things in the course of my time in public life, and I had great people around me, great talent, who oftentimes took that direction and made it happen. So I want to thank you, Fred.
One of the things that we spend a lot of time now trying to analyze what we did right and learn from that and put together a program that we can help other cities and countries and so forth. And one of the things that we did right, I had nothing to do with it, but I benefited from it, is that LACI was created separately from the city. It was put into its own nonprofit. And even though we received much of our funding initially from the city, and it was spawned by the city, it was an independent organization. And talk to me a little bit about that, because people view that as very unique these days.
Well, that was my baby too. I'm a big believer in the role of government, in the importance of providing services, particularly to the locked out and the left out. But I also think the role of government in terms of the economy is to create an environment where the private sector can actually, grow, has an environment where, we're business friendly. And I didn't think it should be a governmental agency. I didn't think we had the expertise that the private sector had in that regard. I think it needed to be entrepreneurial and innovative. So I early on said, this won't be a part of the DWP. And as you know, at the time, David Nahai, I believe, was the head of the DWP, or certainly on the DWP board. And he was one of the people that helped to get identify Mr. Lecretz to do this. And I think Mr. Lecretz also believed very strongly that it should be independent in the city. So we were like-minded in that regard. But, we helped to make it happen. And then, the entrepreneurs took over, and rightfully so.
That's been one of the best parts of working and building LACI, was to be an entrepreneur and to actually have very little space between a decision and action. And so we're moving fast, we're pivoting, yet we have all of the resources and the influence and the knowledge of city. And it's a great combination that, even though we think it's kind of a common thing, it makes sense, a lot of people around the world who try to do this stuff don't think about that. And so it's a really pretty damn interesting approach, and it was really critical to this.
You hit it on the head. I mean, the permitting, all of the things that needed to go to make that happen. And, you need government for that, and you needed the city for that. And we provided all of that while giving you all the opportunity to be innovative, to think out of the box, to not have to deal with the bureaucracies that, cities have to deal with. And, I think it was one of the best decisions we made in that regard.
You've spoken about the importance of the Department of Water and Power and shifting it from its dependence on fossil fuels and the role that the port played. Many cities don't have those capabilities. When I go around the world and I talk about trying to create markets through purchasing power of city agencies, they don't quite have that. But I think we use that pretty innovatively in LA. And in fact, the Department of Water and Power is probably the most important partner of LACI. And they're actually in the same building that LACI is in now.
No question about it. We knew that we had an asset in the Department of Water and Power. Historically, we were looking for cheap power, and so it was dirty power. I said that we want to do this in as least expensive a way as possible, but that these changes were unstoppable. That's where we were going, and we were going to lead the effort, and we have. And I think you're absolutely right. You've had this very symbiotic relationship with the DWP from the beginning, but you've also been independent of them, and that was so important, because oftentimes they respond to the political whims, they have bureaucracies they have to answer to, and we thought if the LaCretz Center was going to work, it needed to be independent of us, it needed to be nimble, it couldn't be saddled with bureaucratic red tape.
You bring up Morton and Morton LaCretz and his daughter Linda, who are obviously private sector real estate folks and a long-time environmentalists. And sometimes people have to take leadership on all sides. And I remember when he put the first money in to LaCretz Innovation Campus. And that was really, when he did that, then other people started to line up. I think it took us 12 different parts of the capital stack to raise that money. But it was a pretty important step to get Morton involved. And he was consistently involved in the program from the very beginning.
Well, that's a big reason why I wanted to mention Morton LaCretz and the LaCretz family, because they were key. They provided the seed money. They bought into the idea. They, from the very beginning, understood what it could do to really jumpstart technology around climate change, a clean and green economy, and we're very grateful to them for that.
The city of Los Angeles, huge city, a mega city. And as its leader, I'm sure you had a lot of people with lots of different competing things they wanted. I know that it's a city that has a lot of different industries. So how does one do what's right and still get elected?
Well, look, all of us want to get elected and re-elected, but you can't be so focused on the future that you forget the present. So I've always told leaders, shared with them my notion that work on the job at hand. Stand up for what you believe in. Explain why you believe in something, as an example, that maybe isn't popular, that maybe most people don't agree with. I think over time, people judge their leaders by their actions, by their successes, but also by their willingness to challenge the status quo and, take on things that aren't easy. I got criticized for time to time as being too much of a risk taker. I got criticized for, as I mentioned, not ultimately planting 1 million trees. And you know what I understood is that, when I first got elected, like so many politicians, I wanted to be loved. By the time I left, I knew it was more important to be respected. And so you get elected, and you get elected basically on, a number of issues, and you just go for it, and you try to do what you can. And as you know, I brought McKinsey in to develop dashboards around everything we did around the environment, around the economy, around right-sizing government, around education, public safety and transportation, the environment. And, I left the criticism and the cackle of people making fun to the people that weren't in the ring.
So I want to close this out by talking about lessons in leadership for a second. I have the opportunity and the pleasure, sometimes the challenge of talking to leaders around the world, literally almost every day. And we're all focused on what do we do about the COVID-19 crisis. Now, we know it's a huge health crisis first and foremost, but it's also obviously an economic crisis. And I think the numbers just came out that the second quarter was down like 30% GDP, at least in the US. And so everybody I talk to around the world is saying, what do we do? What do we do? And they're first, I think, reaction is protect, rebuild what we had, be conservative. Now, my preaching, because is to think about what we need in the future and to build those things that we need in the innovation infrastructure in the future. But I thought, since you've managed through the crisis before, I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
First of all, never waste a crisis. I think there's an opportunity in every crisis. There was in 2008 and 9 when we leveraged the effort to address climate change by developing and promoting a green economy. I think during this COVID crisis, there are two areas where I do believe that we need to take advantage of the crisis. One, around the issue of science and technology with respect to the medical field. I think what we saw was, we can't subcontract to other countries all of our personal protective equipment. We need to manufacture them in the United States. I think the same is true for vaccines and the like. The government should develop a fund, not just for the vaccine, but a fund to spur the private sector to match them and make more investments in R&D in those areas. I think as well, during this crisis, we have an election, and I'm hoping that during this election, we'll elect someone that actually believes in climate change. I know that Joe Biden does, and I think it's important as he addresses the issue of climate change, and he's put out a proposal that is the most far-reaching of any Democratic candidate up to now, but that he puts a fund together. That's what's missing. The federal government should have an innovation fund, an R&D fund that incentivizes the private sector, people like you, to help us develop the technologies. I've said to people from the beginning, I'm all for a Green New Deal as an aspiration, because much of what they want to do tomorrow can't get done without developing the technology. And so around batteries, around a whole slew of things. And so from my vantage point, that's the opportunity here during this COVID crisis. Let's use technology. Let's invest in R&D to incentivize the private sector around science and technology in the medical field, but also around renewables, microgrids, and other innovations in the environment.
Well, Mayor, I want to thank you for your time. This has been really a fascinating conversation. I hope we get a chance to do this again, and I hope that we can get a chance to work together to bring this kind of innovation and economic development to the rest of the world and to share what we've learned. So I want to thank you so much.
Well, Fred, let me thank you again for wanting to do this segment. I wanted to do this because I think what you're doing in terms of taking this on the road, sharing with people the LA story, I think is really, really important. I was born and raised here. My grandpa got here 100 years ago with a dream. I love this town, and this town is without question a global center of innovation. In many ways, LA is to the world in the 21st century what New York was in the 20th and London in the 19th. It's a city of innovators. It's a city of newcomers. In so many ways, it's not a place as much as it's an idea. And this idea that we can green our economy, address climate change, but also grow good jobs, grow a sector of the economy by leveraging technology and innovation is really important. And again, thank you, and I look forward to not just being on, interviewed again, but working with you as well.
We'll do it. Thank you.